Welcome to WLPN LP Chicago 105.5 FN Lumpen Radio. This is Midway Atlas on air. I'm Za'Nia Coleman. I'm a Minneapolis based interdisciplinary artist. I do arts organizing and have my own individual practice, but I've been really excited to participate in the Midway Atlas and share stories from the Midwest and about art and culture from where I'm from.
Hi, my name is Alajia McKizia, and I am based in Omaha, Nebraska. I am a multidisciplinary artist and curator and founder of a recently formed nonprofit called the Joy Ambition, which houses a festival called Juneteenth Joy Fest that I have been running every year. And I also am a program coordinator at Q Illuminarium, which is a science center that opened in last spring here.
So, yeah, I first wanted to start with this. I guess we can talk a little bit about like where you're from, where's your family from. I think with the framing of the Midway Atlas, we were approached and like the framework that we were given was it's to showcase arts in the Midwest specifically. And I guess as an artist and creator, I've never really identified with like being a Midwest based artist. And so this project has me thinking more about like what does that mean in terms of like representation and kind of like how the art landscapes look and things like that. So I'm just curious, like if you want to say again, like where are you from? And yeah, where's your family from?
That's a really interesting perspective because I feel like for me, being in the Midwest, I feel like it's been so hard to, I guess, ignore. So that's really interesting. But I'm from Omaha. I've lived and grown up here my whole life, specifically North Omaha, which is a historically Black neighborhood. Um, and my family is from the South. The best now, to my knowledge, is really like from the matriarch side of my family, and starting with my great grandma and my grandma who grew up in Arkansas, and my grandma moved to Nebraska from sharecropping when she was 17, and then it's kind of been like the lineage has been here ever since. So I think that history, like her history and the history of the matriarch in my family, inspires and informs a lot of the work that I'm doing this to this day.
Got you. Yeah, I live in North Minneapolis, which is also like it's the I would consider it kind of like a historical Black neighborhood in Minnesota, along with like Rondo. And I feel like yeah, I think talking to people, I've been loving to kind of identify. I have a lot of like Indigenous and Native friends, and I love the placemaking that they do in their introductions with like where they're from, where's their family from, and kind of like establishing that. So that's just why I was curious to know. And can you tell me a little bit about like what art practices you have? And I know I was reading up and like you do performance-based things, you do writing, you do a lot of stuff. So I'm curious, just kind of what is how would you describe all the stuff that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always consider myself a multidisciplinary artist and curator, so kind of like a melting pot of things. But historically, how I got involved in the arts community in Nebraska was through visual art. I made a lot of mixed media pieces, really like as a form of coping mechanisms. I When I was a child, I did a lot of creative things. Like my mom kind of just had us in everything. And I think at some point in like young adolescence and high school, I kind of lost that, especially going to a white affluent high school, not really having like any cultural identity that I could connect to. And so then after that, I started to get back into art like when I was like 18, 19, and really it was like a way for me to have like a coping mechanism for my trauma that wasn't unhealthy. So I started making like visual pieces and mixed media pieces, and really like I like using found objects or things that might represent just part of my identity. I think that's really interesting, using found objects or materials that kind of like represent like I guess how the human body can have like this mass, and like our traumas and our emotions can like leave behind energy. I just always thought that was really interesting, and that different materials can kind of like embody that. So I started out with that, and then kind of been in and out of like movement performances and done like a little mix of both of those practices, and then done a lot of like socially engaged artwork. So doing a lot of like community, like placemaking based art projects, specifically in North Omaha. Have been involved in like a lot of arts administration in North Omaha or in Omaha in general. And more recently, like it was always kind of in the background. I used to curate a lot of events, but now it's kind of like solely just curating events and programming at my work at the Luminarium, but also outside of the Luminarium. And so my art practice, I think, has changed a little bit. I don't really like consider myself fully like a practicing artist. I just feel like I'm like doing a lot of arts curation, and then, through stage design and stuff, I can have moments of art through that. But really, like a lot of it now also is administrative work to just try to get like events and activities done. So it's kind of like been the journey. And looking to hopefully do like some more personal practice stuff here soon when I have time.
Got you. Yeah, and I guess when I said earlier, like not, because I think culturally, I definitely feel Midwest. But I
Mhm.
guess like as of the last 3 years, I've been doing this practice of I travel twice a month or twice a year
Mhm.
for a month long to a different spot. And so I recently came back from New York, and the way coast, I guess, the way the coast are set up, like art feels very like somebody in Philly will know somebody in New York or somebody in Delaware or somebody in North Carolina. Like it kind of feels like more like interconnected. And I guess when it comes to arts within the Midwest, in my mind, I'm always like, I think we should be closer. You know what I mean? Like there should be more
Absolutely.
networks and more pathways to each other. And so I guess in that way, that's why I was like, oh, I guess the Midwest art scene as a whole doesn't feel connected at all. Like even growing up in Minneapolis, like Chicago artists feel so far
Right.
away, which is ridiculous. And I guess I'm curious, how do you feel like it is being an artist based where you are, and like having people come in and y'all being able to go out, and like do you feel connected to other art scenes? Does it feel very isolating?
That's a good question. I think that the Omaha art scene and being an artist in Omaha, similar to what you're saying, like it is very disconnected from the Midwest as a whole. And I think also Omaha is a pretty like enigmatic place. Like if you've never been here, or if it's just hard to perceive like what actually is going on in this city. And I think that like it is perceived as like a very small town, but it is like the largest like metropolitan city in Nebraska. And so there's a lot happening here, but how those stories are told, whose stories are being told is like really, I think, in question and really curious, like, and it's just interesting, I think, and very nuanced. So that's the thing. And I don't feel like we could be as connected to other Midwest cities as like it should happen. I think that that's something that I've been personally interested in over the past couple of years. And the reason why I have like branched out and booked people like Ricky or brought artists from like Kansas. And recently I've been traveling to St. Louis a lot and viewing their arts and cultural scene, because there's a lot of models that I think that we can learn from each city, and how arts and culture is thriving, how are communities showing up for artists in those cities, and how can we like put that into practice in places that are very nearby, very proximal. Like Minneapolis is a 7 hour drive or like an hour flight from here. And so I feel what you're saying about like, Philly, and someone might know someone from Philly and New York and vice versa. And I don't think necessarily that happens here, but I think that's like an incredible opportunity. And I think that from my perspective of like being able to view some other Midwest cities and their cultural scene, they're all really special and intimate. And I just think that like we could help each other interconnect with like in many ways when it comes to just like the type of work we're doing and elevating it. And specifically me booking a lot of performing artists, I would love to be able to kind of build this like cultural exchange of like people from, let's say, like Minneapolis coming to Omaha or back and forth, and kind of having that interconnectivity just to grow all of our art scene like as a whole. So um yeah, I don't know if that answers
Yeah,
it, but
no, for sure, that definitely did. And I feel like um when I hear about when I hear about like the bridging of folks and being able to like kind of travel around and see other things, it makes me think about like even within your city, what were some of the examples you saw growing up that like kind of let you know that like what were some of the pillars in your community artistically that like let you know what the art scene was, like how were there any other artists around you that you were inspired by, whether it be in your family or just like folks around that you came up under?
yeah. So like I said, like when I was a child, my mom just had us in like literally everything. So like I played the clarinet, I played the piano, like I was in painting and drawing classes, like I was in ballet and dance classes, and then kind of lost some of that throughout my like young adolescence until I returned to it. And luckily, um I have like the pleasure and I feel like the privilege, even though it can be kind of quite annoying, to grow up with siblings and cousins who are close to my age, if not a little bit older. And so when I was around 17, 18, I just had the influence of them. So like one of my cousins is like a photographer and a videographer, and then my sister does music. Um, and my brother does music. Like a lot of my family does a lot of creative stuff. So my sister and my cousin specifically, like when I was 18, they're like, whatever you want to do, like don't listen to other people, like be like, oh, you have all these years to waste, like just start doing it now. Like doesn't mean you have to be like super stressed or super serious, but like just think intentionally about how you want to spend your time and what you want to go towards, because like the time is of the essence. And so kind of having that influence of being able to explore creativity with the mindset of like, I have the time now and I should pursue it based off of what they said to me, I think was like really powerful and allowed me to kind of learn and get involved in the arts community in Omaha at that time. And so, yeah, I think there's like different like local musicians who were kind of around that I was into. There was a couple there was like in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is a nearby city. They had First Fridays at this place called Parish Studios, and one of the studios, Renee Norman, who doesn't live here anymore, but she always had like the coolest First Fridays and had gallery shows and like music, and it was just like a lot of like diverse people that I wasn't around previously when I was in high school. So I think that was like a big inspiration to see that like, oh, there is like a vibrant arts community here. There are a lot of different artists who are very talented at what they do. And if you haven't like gotten into it, you wouldn't really know about it. So I think those are some of the things that I would say kind of shaped me like locally, and then just being able to see art at some specific places in Omaha, like the Union for Contemporary Art, which is a art museum in North Omaha, and then the Jocelyn, which is a pretty large art institution that I kind of grew up around. I feel like I've been able to, expand to see like other artists who inspire me, like Mickalene Thomas and Vanessa German and Nick Cave, and witness their work, or even get to meet some of those people as they've traveled through for a different experience here. So I think those were big inspirations.
Nice. And then when you think about like how we were talking about the Midwest and like Black communities and kind of just being, it can feel very isolating and very just like you're not seen in a lot of spaces. And so I guess like within your work, as an artist and the spaces that you foster within community, like how can art be a space for like healing and collective action? And like specifically, how do you use your work in that way?
Mm. To me, I think like art is essential to like all parts of life. And I think it's easier like said than to put into practice. But I think a big important thing for me is like using art as coping mechanisms in a community, or using art as really just forms of joy in a community. That feels really important. And I think that like when art is really embedded in an ecosystem of a community, that it can inform so many things like urban planning, like the design of housing, like how a neighborhood feels and thrives. And I think sometimes that's missed, especially in communities that are divested from, whether that's redlining, whether that's racism, whether that's all different types of things that, like Black and other marginalized communities go through. And so I feel like, I guess, ways that I've tried to show up is specifically in North Omaha, there is a long history of arts and culture thriving, um, and specifically like um, a highlight part of that would be like the 1920s to the 1960s, when there was like a big kind of music fluctuation that was happening, like Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong and all these incredible like jazz musicians were passing through North Omaha and experiencing shows there. And so I think for me and a lot of the work that I've done in North Omaha is just like trying to remember and tell the stories of the people before us to inspire the future. Because I think if you're imagining what's possible and trying to dream of the future, is like, how do you connect the past and the present to that? And typically, like, history in a way does repeat itself. So how can I look to people in my community or people who were involved in those times before before like redlining and racism kind of, you know what I mean, like dwindle down and erase like our neighborhoods. Like how can I just like tell those stories or do it in new and innovative ways that include young people who want to be involved in the neighborhoods and who want arts and culture to thrive. So I feel like that's been a big way for me. So I guess in what way specifically is like I try to do a lot of right now in my work, like it's a lot of like music based, like performing art based. So whether it's spoken word poetry, whether that's dance, and really just like as a way to tell the stories of the people in North Omaha, artists from North Omaha, but also like bring artists to North Omaha, like art like Ricky or even people like La Russell, who's very like up and coming right now, or even Terrace Martin, who has had connections to North Omaha. So just being able to like connect people back to be like, this is what's possible, but also like, how can we kind of innovate Omaha to be like a place on the map that people are seeing as not just like a flyover city, but a place that has like a thriving arts and a cultural scene um that you can like explore. And so I feel like that is like something that the ways I try to show up, I guess, thinking about art in a community. And then also like luckily I've been grateful to be a part of like public art projects in North Omaha, and then even some art projects that have happened at the Luminarium. So just like besides the performing arts, like how can visual art change a space, and like also how can they do the remembering and showing like the legacy of a place. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, and I think when you were talking about that, it had me thinking when it comes to support within the city, from like other artistic peers and folks like that. Does it feel like y'all's art team feels connected and like all in all, you guys all kind of work together and work collaboratively? Or can you just like tell me a little bit about your art team?
Yeah, I think it's all subjective in a way, but I would say like there is a decent amount of I'd say there is a decent amount of support. Peer-to-peer support has always been an interesting experience. I think one thing that I've tried to learn throughout my art career and throughout like my community organizing work is that abundance is important, and really losing a scarcity mindset is important. I think a lot of the ways that I felt lack of support, especially from older peers in the community that I looked up to, was that like they felt that there wasn't room for both of us to exist. And so a lot of gatekeeping happens, a lot of just dealing with like people who are just trying to put you down instead of like put you up, especially when you're generally doing something from the community. So I think that has a big issue. And I think sometimes, it's easier to focus on the negative than it is the positive. But I will say there's also in that other essence been like a lot of people who have showed up for me and have been able to teach me and connect me to things to further my work. And specifically, like, I always try to think about what institutions in Omaha, um, specifically like art museums or like nonprofits that have like large capital or large resources, how do they show up for you in the community? And specifically without the help of like the Union for Contemporary Art, I wouldn't be able to be doing some of the work that I'm doing now. It's like, because when you're dreaming of something from the bottom, like it is kind of like you have to be like nimble with your resources and kind of scrappy. And so when people can show up and can teach you a skill or can offer, whether that's like money or like in kind support, I think that has been really like relative. So I feel like I've had people really pour into me. I have had people try to drain me, but overall, like I think one thing that I've always felt really strongly about is like I think sometimes there is this like perceived notion that like you have to leave your hometown or your city to thrive as an artist. And so people do really like look towards like the coast, like LA and New York to go and pursue their art. And for me, I think just because of like my family legacy and like thinking about all my grandma like sacrificed to live here and all my mom sacrificed for me to exist and like kind of have a somewhat more privileged life than them. I just have really kind of like no is not an answer when it comes to like the projects that
Mhm.
I want to actualize in the community. And I think like the good thing about the Midwest is that like is since it's not as saturated as the coastal cities, that there's a lot of vacant spaces, there's a lot of places to just dream and build it and build something. And so I've always felt like even if people told me no or tried to get gapes up, I'm like, I'm just gonna move around you and do what I want to do, especially like if my intentions are rooted in community and rooted in doing something that's like truly meaningful, then like if I have to live that out regardless of like if you agree with it or not. So I think that's the way that I've been able to move, but also like it's not always sustainable to do stuff without a lot of support. And so I'm trying to like rebuild in that form. But
Yeah, I love that because I think one of the things that had me really excited about talking with you is like that similarity alone is like even with tangible, Ricky and I really try to, at least now specifically, we're really trying to also kind of have a bridge or a freeway going of like allowing people to come in because I feel like it's also a key part of artistic development I don't think you can stay in one spot and like get everything you need. I think there's a certain level of travel and commuting and like being in relationship to other people from other places. Um, and I know I had framed up one of the questions around funding, like specifically because I know in the Midwest we're not even in the Midwest in Minneapolis we're known for having very good arts funding. But like one of the caveats is like they don't ever want to fund you going anywhere else. They're just starting to loosen up where we can use funding to get people here to like benefit the populations that are here, but like we can't go or use funds to go elsewhere. And so I'm curious, what are some of the ways that funding is structured in your space that you're like, it could be improved in this way, versus like how it's actually showing up.
Mhm. That's a good question. So for me, oh, I feel like that's yeah, it's such a good but tricky like answer. So for me, I guess the structure of funding in Omaha is pretty interesting because we have more like millionaires per capita, like, like one of the richest people in the entire world like built their business in Omaha and like there's a lot of money here and a lot of money being funded into like the nonprofit sector in Omaha. And so I will say that it seems to be that like if you want a project to be funded, if you want to be invested into, it is way easier to do it through a nonprofit than not. I think that like luckily for my projects, I feel like I've had somewhat not easy, but like I've had accessibility to funds and really like for Juneteenth Joy Fest, like it being a cultural holiday, like I've always kind of had like integrity at the top of my mind and how to keep that centered in the work that I'm doing because I don't want to ever, be not representing like the culture and the community in the way that I want to, especially like with something like Juneteenth. So I've had a lot of, let's say, a bit more freedom to spend the funds in the way that's most meaningful to me, which is like paying artists equitably, which is like being able to kind of like not have to have like a visibility when it comes to sponsorship that feels like we're selling it too much. So I feel like that has been a benefit to me. I think one thing that feels like an issue is that like a lot of large white institutions get a lot more funding than smaller Black institutions, or not even Black, just people of color, marginalized communities. Um, and that in a way, a lot of funders don't want to support new nonprofits because they think that you should just be somehow involved or trying to be involved with maybe more established nonprofits. But that's not always easiest because a lot of large institutions don't really open their doors for you. They don't really um, support local artists in a way that's like actually meaningful. A lot of large institutions kind of, I think, prioritize bringing artists into Omaha, but never really that interconnectedness. So I feel like through my own work, through my own capacity, that's something that I've tried to kind of bridge the gap. And even right now, like you're talking about the professional development or artistic development, like traveling and being able to see things, I think that's so important. And I wouldn't be able to do the art practice that I'm doing now, or even any of the events or curations I'm doing now, without all of the experiences that I've been able to like pretty much self-fund. And so I
Mm.
recently did this professional development trip for artists to St. Louis, where my nonprofit paid for like majority of the trip. And we went to this music festival and got to visit their arts district and go to this conference and all these things. And I'm trying to get that to be funded on a regular basis because I do think that like, you know, there is many barriers to why an artist might not be able to travel, especially from like a marginalized community. And so I think like having those moments to be inspired by other cities, by other cultures and what's happening can really like inform the work. So I think funding is like pretty interesting. Like I've had a lot of success in crowdfunding, just asking for funds to do an event that's
Mm.
free. I've had a lot of success in like grant writing. But it's also just it can be muddy when you're like accepting money from different foundations or donors and always just want to know like keep the integrity in mind of what I'm doing and just not try to like I think in Omaha also, this is probably like my last thought about this, but I think in Omaha also it feels like a lot of a lot of like organizations kind of been to what like funders want instead of just like maybe funders genuinely supporting the work. And so I feel like that's something I am extremely wary of and constantly have to fight against. Like, I don't want to just be doing this because I think it's going to get me the most money. Like, I want to be doing it because
Mm.
it's the most valuable. And that's really how a nonprofit should work. But like, we all know the nonprofit industrial complex exists. And sometimes it is about like the numbers rather than like the value of the work. And I think like combating that feels really important.
Thank you, Alajia, for this great conversation. And just remember that you're listening on Midway Atlas on Air, and we can continue on. Yeah, and so back on the topic of support, and I know you mentioned that like you were able to get support for free events, and oftentimes, and I think that's something that we often get support for here too. Is like if you're doing something for free, people will fund you. And I'm curious, as the organizer, as the person doing the work, how has this journey been for you? And like, does it feel sustainable? Is it hard making a transition to like getting your like? Do you feel supported in with the work that you're doing? If that makes sense. Like for example, Ricky and I with Tangible, we have a studio space now. We would love to do Tangible full time, but most of the time funders want to fund the program, but not the people doing the program. So like we don't get compensated for the time in the same way, and so we've often had to have many other jobs to then fund our time to do these types of work. And so oftentimes we'll leave an experience where everybody else has been paid and funded, and we still have to like work 60-hour work weeks to cover our bills and things like that. So I'm curious, like, does you the way your work is set up, do you feel supported in that way? And does this work how has this work been sustainable for you?
Oh, absolutely. So, I think it's been like quite a journey. So specifically, like a lot of some of the other events that I was doing or art practices, like I've gotten a lot of grant funds through like the Union for Contemporary Art has been like a big supporter of my career. And they have a a thing called the Populist Fund where they give like $10,000 to individual artists for projects. And so that was able to like fund a really fun project of mine called Sunday Soul, which Ricky and Za'Nia, both from Minneapolis, performed at. Um, and then there's other places like Amplify Arts that give like smaller, unrestricted grants that have been really helpful. So like re-granting, I think, has been helpful in Omaha. As far as Juneteenth Joy Fest and building that, so this next year will be the fifth year of me doing it. I started in my backyard in 2021, and I raised like a very minimal budget, pretty much to pay everyone but myself. So I feel like I've definitely like been that. And I think honestly, like for a long time, it was like also about my mindset and specifically with like projects that I'm actualizing from my own like heart or passion. Like I think there was so much of me that was like, well, if I feel dedicated to it enough that I don't have to worry about pay right now, or I can self-sacrifice for it. And so I feel like I've had to get out of that mindset. And really surprisingly, like funders in Omaha, and advice I've had from a lot of leaders in Omaha was that like you have to pay yourself because like funders want to be able to see that there's someone committed to the mission enough by paying themselves. So for a long time I felt like, is this tricky because I'm still fundraising all this money to really make this operate in the way that's possible? Like, so should I like be paying myself? But I've turned out that it has been a benefit. And I feel you in the same way, like I'm still working a full-time job and still doing this and kind of sacrificing a lot of like rest and hours that I need to just live and breathe and experience life to just do what I believe in. So I think I'm still in this tricky place where like, um, yeah, that I'm still having to work for my like livelihood, and even just now, like I'm just now starting to like somewhat recoup some of the hours that I put into it, but it's still so tricky because like if you're not getting a salary for something and are getting like a 1099 as like an independent contractor, like there's so much that goes into, having to like account for taxes as a self-employed person versus like an employee. And so that's something I'm still struggling with is like, okay, yeah, like, yeah, I made this amount of money from this event, or this festival that I'm putting on and putting probably like I don't know how many hours, I couldn't even tell you a year into, but then I have to account for like 40% of that to go to taxes and then also account for someone to help me do the accounting for it. You know what I mean? So I think that part is complicated. But I do, I guess, have high hopes that one day when I feel ready to transition, that I'll be supported in that enough to be able to fund like my livelihood. So I think it's really hard. It's something that people battle with. I think depending on what you're doing, I think there is opportunity, but it's all just like nuance in it. And it's like, how do you convince people that this is worth funding, and
Hmm.
even though it is. So I feel like that's hard.
Yeah. And I think kind of along with what you were talking about, like the evolution of like kind of where you started and then like going into like where you are now and thinking about what things can look like. I guess I'm interested, what have been some of the like biggest lessons during your artistic journey and process and with your both your personal practice and your community organizing practice? Yeah, like what are some of those things that you're like, oh, my mind changed around this, or like this has become very crucial to my practice? Yeah.
I feel like with my personal practice, and especially when it was coming to be like multidisciplinary, I think that's like something that a lot of Black people have dealt with about being multiple. And like I've always been told to just be one way or just to limit yourself in that instance. So I feel like having to break down those barriers that like I can be an artist that wants to dance one day and then wants to paint one day and be fine and own that and affirm that. I think that was really important to my self journey because I think a lot of the times that people always try to tell you, well, you should just be this expert in this one thing. And that like really alludes to just whiteness in a way that I don't really agree with. And I think letting go of that and like erasing part of me that wants to express how I want to express just to express it was really big. And I think part of that also goes into like feeling the need to over explain why I'm doing something as an artistic practice. I think, to be in the art world and exist in the art world, sometimes you feel like you have to have these really long, like eloquent answers. And I think sometimes it's okay to be like, this was I was inspired by this from my childhood, or I just did it because I wanted to do it and I don't want to explain it. And I feel like that has been
Mm,
liberating, and really like honestly watching Nick Cave talk about his work. Specifically, he came to Omaha once for this really fancy like private art event, but he talked about his work in just like a really simple way, just like saying he was inspired by his childhood. And I think he just didn't feel the need to like over explain what he was doing because the work shows for itself. And I think it's also like it is about interpretation. I think as like a community organizer, one thing that feels important to me is I think like still having like accountability for self and self separation from the work that I'm doing, because I think sometimes you can like um allude the community work you're doing to heal as like a journey for personal healing, and they're not the same. And so you see a lot of community organizers or artists like kind of go through these really crazy like journeys publicly about how just publicly like they're going through stuff and it's being very much projected into their work. And I feel like for me I've seen that happen to other people, and I think in the way the work can like swallow you up. And I feel like because like maybe you're dedicated so much to it, you don't have a lot of time to do that self-reflection. But it is important because I don't always want to wear my like, I think it's just like separating that to be like what I'm going through personally is different than what the community is going through. And I can heal part of myself through what I'm doing in the community, but I can't heal all of myself. And just because I'm doing stuff in the community doesn't make me like a perfect human. And I need to have like self-reflection and self-accountability and like also take responsibility to heal to do better community work. So, but then also just to heal to be a better person for myself. So I feel like that has been a really big lesson. And I think also one thing that I'm prioritizing very much in community work is um, how do I find enjoyment in this, or how does this feed into me? Because I feel like sometimes you view community work as having to be completely selfless, but like then you just get lost in doing it and it's not beneficial to you if you're working a billion hours and not resting and just always sacrificing. And so I feel like I've built a lot of boundaries of being like, these people who are like demanding of my time in certain ways, like they're gonna have to get it when I have time, because I do work a full-time job. I have a family, and like I have things that to just live and experience life. And so I feel like breaking down that pressure of like I need to be on and 100% for the community all the time. Like it also needs to benefit my time and also needs to bring me joy. So how do I get closer to that, even though the work may be hard or difficult? How do I get closer to joy in it? And although how do I feel like supported fully, and what do I need to be supported? Like I think reflecting on that has been really important. And I think one thing that has been the ultimate of ultimate like importance to me is that having like boundaries and respect enough to know who my work is for or who do I need to work with. Because I think for a long
Mm.
time I would just try to support any and every artist and do all this work to uplift people. And I do think that like if you're a decent person or whatever, that not even if you're a decent person, that like if you have art, it potentially deserves to be shown or whatever. But and I think that for some I would let like people be really like evil and disrespectful to me as a human and still feel like, well, because of how I feel passionately about the community as a whole, I'm still going to support this person and uplift their work. And that was at my own detriment. And so I feel like I have strong boundaries to be like to now say, if this person has intentionally been disrespectful, or like has been just really not a nice person to me and has caused me like harm, then I'm not going to do anything to lift their work. Doesn't mean I have to like say anything bad about them, or not give the, not like or take away opportunities, but I don't have to be the one who is like the healer or the organizer for them if they don't have like the basic respect for me. So I think things like that, it's like how do I consider myself more been super important. And not to get off topic, I feel like it kind of circles back to your question before about support. I think one thing that's hard about doing free and accessible events, which I really enjoy doing, and I do see the importance to it, and I do see also the importance of like investing in artists or curations by like paying for it, but I do see like the accessibility point in not paying. But I think one thing that's been hard is like when I do free events that the community doesn't support in the way that like it needs to
Mm.
sustain it. Like just because it's free and accessible, I think like it's an opportunity for people to invest in it in different ways by really like, like using your platform to share it, or by volunteering, or by helping like connect us to other resources that can support the work. And so I always want that to be like a mutual pot instead of just like, oh, I'm putting this free experience and then people can just come and like completely extract from it and not really like have the whole like communal aspect that it should to thrive. So I think those things are like what I've been thinking about, what have been important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I feel like, and this is for some reason, this made me think about when I'd asked, like, how does the funding make you, how does it shape your work? I feel like one of the things that I've noticed in Minneapolis specifically is with funders, with all funding being activity or participant focus and not artist focus, it makes it so there's like this huge overlay on um like on engagement specifically. And I think engaging and public engagement is a specific skill not every artist has. Like, not every artist is a community artist. And so I think you get in these tricky situations where people are using $5,000 to not only like just do their art, but then also to like plan public programming and like plan it well with like intention. And it's like everybody's trying to do occupy all the roles at the same exact time. And I guess I'm curious, how has like delegating and kind of spreading out some of those responsibilities, how does your team look? Do you have a team? How do you like build out support for yourself when doing things? Because yeah, I mean, throwing a whole festival sounds like a lot of work, and so I'm just curious, yeah, like how's that been for you?
Yeah, I think it's always like a learning journey, especially like when you build something from the grassroots level. And so for a long time, like the first year and or two that I did this, it was like majority me. Even now, I would say it's still majority me. Like I've been in a place where I'm fundraising for the event, curating the lineup, managing the artists, doing the accounting, like um leading the committee. And so I'm doing all of these hats and it's just not sustainable in any way. And I've had to like learn that. So like it's been a very hard lesson. And honestly, it's been a lesson where like a lot of the time, like even this past year, when or this year when we did Joy Fest, and it was a really successful event. It was really great, but like there were so many times where I was just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore because it's so much work. It's so stressful. Like my stress levels are like literally up, like they're just so, I'm just in such a high stress and just like even it doesn't allow for, I'm like, if there's anything that like were to happen to me or to my family where I would need to focus, like this event couldn't happen because I'm the one who's doing all of it, right? And so I have a committee of people that help for like the maybe 4 to 6 months before the event is happening. But it's been honestly hard to like get people who like can stay committed throughout the whole
Hmm.
time. So I think that's something that I'm learning right now is like, how can I have a committee that's really invested in this enough to just be involved and like I'm really big on paying artists and paying especially like people of color who are involved in my projects. So it might not be the most money in the world, but everyone is getting paid. But now I'm trying to maybe structure in my fundraising from the get-go to just have like a set stipend from the beginning to participate in the committee. And then right now, this is like the first time where I'm considering like hiring people to help out with the festival and help out with like social media and things like that because I don't have the capacity or honestly the want to do everything anymore. So I think that's really important is like right now I'm like have a little bit of funds. It's not like to pay a salary, but it is to like contract people who can do social media, people who can organize the event side of it, and who can do like some of the admin work that comes along. So it's not all on me or all in my brain. So I feel like that has been really helpful. And I definitely like am super grateful for like a lot of friends who have like shown up and like helped me set up a stage or who helped me write through something or just even dealt with my tears. Like I think a lot of friends have showed up and volunteered like for any event that I've been doing and like really like without the help of like the people who show up in that way and like who can join the committee and stay out, like stay throughout it. I think that has been like, like exceptional. Like you don't do anything completely alone. But it is like a lot of the responsibility is falling on me right now and I'm definitely trying to change that. Also because I don't want for something like Juneteenth and that's a community festival, it was really like a way to support local artists, connect local artists to national artists, and support the local North Omaha community and Black artists and entrepreneurs. And so I don't want it to just be like Alajia's vision. I feel like having more people at the table to be able to help um, structure and to help really like build the vision for the work is really, really essential because I don't have all the answers for the one for the community that I'm trying to serve. And I think in this instance with this cultural festival, like it is important for other people to be involved. So I'm trying to also build that is like who can help build the vision of this in a meaningful way. Like I'm happy to lead it and to help facilitate that. But I think other voices are important. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But we're
Yeah.
but even like getting to the point of, okay, I have a little bit of funds to pay people, but now I have to like structure how does this look? Like how do these jobs look? How who's I'm still managing it. It's just really it is really hard, you know. But I guess my goal is to just like do some contracting work right now and then maybe next year be able to hire some part-time help and continue to like grow it until maybe there's like a full organization that can be structured, but it's just like building blocks and it takes time. Like I feel like every year I'm doing it, I still feel like a beginner because I'm learning so much, but I'm really grateful for
Hmm.
the opportunity. So
Yeah, and I when you had mentioned being overwhelmed, it makes me think like one of the things I think tangible is we're 7 years in now. And I think initially we were like early 20s, we're out of college, like we're gonna do all these things, and like we had ideas. I think we did a lot of those ideas. And so between like burnout, life, bills, all the things, we haven't had time to like envision a new thing or like envision the next phase or like what's happening next per se. And so I guess I'm curious when you're feeling either lack of inspiration or motivation or when you are overwhelmed, what are some of your tools? Like what are some of the things that you know help recenter you and help you like yeah, kind of stay in a space of like being generative?
mhm. I think that is such a learning lesson for me. I think one big thing for me is like having pride in what I'm doing. I think that's always really hard. Like even to this very day today, like I haven't even like had any personal celebration about like what happened this year for Joy Fest and to be able to like post about it and celebrate it. I think sometimes I can be really like avoidant when it comes to celebration and just be like critiquing about what happened that I didn't like and how what am I missing the mark on instead of like what am I doing really well. So I think that's something that I'm constantly learning that kind of helps reground me to be like, you know, you've done this before, you can do it again. Like I said, I think that like my family is a big motivator. Like I'm so grateful to have had a mom who's really like present and supportive in whatever I wanted to do. Like when I didn't get a college degree, mostly because of like funding, like I couldn't afford it. And I just think when I was starting to get into art or whatever, like my mom has always been so supportive and being like, you should explore whatever you want to explore. And having that, having a supportive family has been really inspiring. And I always think about like, I'm doing this work because like my ancestors literally like sacrificed their lives for me to be here and for me to experience joy and to bring experiences of joy. And there's nothing else I'd rather be doing than that. And so I just always try to keep centered in that. Like, you know, like it's hard, but like there are people who support you and like this is what you're meant to do. So if you keep moving forward, it'll get more seamless in that sense. And I think traveling like and being able to go to other shows or have my own experiences of joy is really, really important. So like even in August, I went to see Mick Jenkins at the Dakota in Minneapolis, and it was like he's one of my favorite artists. It's like one of the best shows I've been to, and like going to stuff like that is like this is why I'm doing the work that I'm doing is because I see the power in these artists on these stages in these other cities, and I want that to happen in Omaha as often as possible, and for there to be space for other artists to have those experiences. So I think like traveling is always a big help. And I think just being around good people, like I feel really grateful to have a group of friends who all do like insane work in urban planning and development and policy and advocacy, but somehow still have like time to help me set up for an event or just help just like I don't know, just being around really positive people who, you know, like you can support each other, but you can also like really understand that each other's busy and so I think those are things that like ground me and I think taking time to just like document stuff. I feel like writing
Mm.
down my own personal reflections is important, but then also like I think one thing that grounds me is like I've tried to document everything that I do and always have made money in the budget to do that, even if it's just like whether it's pictures or whether it's a video, whether it's a recording or whatever, just to have like this thing of like look at like kind of back to celebrating, like look at all the what's here and like what's cultivated. So I would say those things are grounding and then like eating good food and going on bike rides and listening to a favorite album or something.
Oh, also, what is your favorite album right now?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I would say like the most present one is
Hmm.
like Doechie's new album. So what is it? Alligator Bites Never Heal. I
Hmm.
think it's a really beautiful body of work. But one of my favorite artists that I listen to kind of on repeat is Yusuf Days. And so his album Black Classical Music, and then he has like a couple like live albums that he does in like incredibly beautiful nature sets. So he has one that he did um in Malibu, I want to say, in like kind of like the mountains, and it was really gorgeous. And so I always listen to that, kind of grounds me. And I listen to a lot of like Coco Roco too. They're really amazing. So
Got you. Okay, perfect. I would love to close us out with like, what are you most excited about in the future? Like, what kind of feels like your next, like not even next steps, but just like, what are you excited to explore? What are you excited to experiment with? Whether that be your own work, what your arts, what your events can look like, and kind of just dreaming.
yes, I am really excited in this current moment to build structure. Like that's kind of where I'm at because I think just like the more operational support that I have to do the things that I want, the more um, just systems I think is going to help specifically this festival continue to thrive. That feels really important, like a good segue for me to be able to dive into other projects the way that I want to. I'm really looking forward to in my personal practice. I've been DJing. That's a fun, like kind of hobby thing. So I'm looking forward to maybe doing that more seriously and maybe having some shows and some cool Midwest cities that I want to have some shows in. And then overall, like long term, I kind of have a goal just about bringing more national artists, more national diverse artists to Omaha, and really kind of like bringing back the idea of like smaller intimate shows. Like I don't know, I'm really interested in having an artist residency program, like specifically performance residencies, like kind of similar to like the Dakota in Minneapolis or Blue Note in New York, about having like smaller intimate shows where artists can do like one or two runs a night. I think that's something that Omaha needs and would really add value to our cultural landscape right now. So that's something that I'm really interested in doing in the future, and I'm kind of just like working on how can I make that happen? Those are the things I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, but well, thank you for this talk. I'm really excited to just kind of have this out in the world. And I think the more I kind of think about what art connections in the Midwest look like, I just love that you're so close and that there also are other people doing the work. And I think sometimes when it kind of feels isolating, you're like, dang, nobody else, there's nobody to make a connection with, but there are other people doing very similar work, like with intention. And I think intention sometimes is the part that I think there are tons of people doing the work. People doing it with intention, I think, are a little harder to find that align and kind of think about Blackness within art spaces within these like types of spheres similarly. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing, and I can't wait to either participate, help, visit. I think we'll be actually in Omaha soon, if I'm correct. One of the things for me that I really appreciate about also your work and your practice and some of the things I read about you personally is just like the Black feminist focus. And I think Black feminist theory guides a lot of my ideology and like the work that I do and how I do the work that I do. So I always kind of ask people to contribute quotes or pieces that like really resonate with them. And so I put in one, and Sadia Hartman has been on my mind a lot lately. I've been doing a lot of work in the archives. I actually got liver praxis tattooed on my neck. My mom was like, "What is that?" And so, one of the things I loved about her work is just like the audacity for self authorship and just like redefining what has happened in the past and remembering and actually making space for people to like reimagine what actually happened then from a different lens and from different viewpoints. And so one of her quotes is, "They dreamed of a world that would not condemn them to poverty, want, and isolation, a world that would allow them to live fully and to express that surplus of feelings that were the product of social vision and a longing for the future." So yeah, that is one of my favorite quotes from Sadia Hartman. Do you want to give one?
So I'll give this quote from Vanessa German. I believe that all human beings deserve and have the right to be as dimensionally safely human as they can dare to be. Standing at the center of that and turning dimensionally in the sphere to say, I have one life, I will die, and what is the best way, the most thorough way, the most selfishly compassionate way, because compassion is a circle that I can inhabit the living actions I believe all humans deserve. So I would say that was one. But also shout out to Bell Hooks and to many other wonderful Black feminist thinkers that have inspired my work. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about the work. And I've always really like admired Ricky and like Changeable Collective and seeing what you guys have been doing. So I'm just grateful to have been in the mix and definitely looking forward to connect.
Thank you all for listening to this edition of Midway Atlas on air. My name is Za'Nia Coleman again with Tangible Collective, and I am based in Minneapolis. And I had a beautiful conversation. And thank you so much to Alajia from Omaha, Nebraska, for sharing your story about Blackness and placemaking, specifically in the Midwest. And I hope you guys stay tuned and listen to other pieces on Midway Atlas on air.